We're going to discuss spiritual realization, spiritual consciousness, God realization, which is the only reason for spirituality, to understand who and what God really, truly, and fully is, which is an infinite, divine effulgence, it's a joy, a happiness, and God, more than anything else, is a friend. Infinitely more aware, conscious than you can ever dream. Even in our little everyday thoughts, God is there waiting to bring us forward. One more step, one more day into our divine realization. To begin with, no one ever died. You cannot die. That never happened. You go to hallowed sites like Gettysburg or whatever, you'll feel the presence of those who gave their lives. You feel it in your church. You feel it throughout the world, in temples, in your home. Many different places of the world are less civilized, mechanically speaking, than our country, and you'll feel the presence of the ancients, and everyone will have pictures of their parents, their grandparents, or something to symbolize it. And there's a sacredness in life that's always deep within our breast, our heart, our soul. Spirituality, in a deeper sense, however, involves transcending through this with the help of those who love and care for us into a very, very, very deep place of wonder, of worship. It involves a friendship with our Father God. It's something so holy and perfect and wonderful that you have a hard time just mentioning it. But it's always there for those of us who see Him, who know Him, who abide with Him. There is a holiness within all of our hearts who are spiritual. Today's session, we're going to discuss to some extent what it would take to spiritualize the whole world, which cannot be done because the world does not exist according to all the mystical traditions, or it is a hell. Nonetheless, if enough of us understand what's being said today, we can let go of every artifice, of every impropriety of the world, and live in a sacred plane of being. And from that, the great vistas into eternity, to see the actual presence of our Father God is there for us to behold forever. In traditional spiritual practices, it's been called self-realization, spiritual illumination. Salvation in the scripture means illumination. It's a mystical script. If you read it, like Paul said, if you have to know the mystery of God to understand the scripture, it's written in a mystery, he said, which means the mystery religions, the mystical, where you have a direct spiritual apprehension of God. It's something so sacred and holy that you really can't ever discuss it with anyone else. Everyone in this room has had this experience at different points in our life, and yet the world collides in and through us and around us all day. And there's always worlds in collision about us. It's very complex. But if you understand that this does not have to be, it need not be the entirety of the world. So these places that are hallowed, that are sacred, if you sit there quietly, the whole world disappears. And that's the point of self-realization. If you really take spirituality serious, you give up all the lesser wants or needs or have-tos or cares or woes. And if you truly, truly, truly love another, anyone, and you have this much spirituality, you'll see that that person's life can never be perfected until nothing of this plane of being, of this world, exists. So you take it upon yourself to illumine the entire world. And you will do it. It's not real complicated. The dark side will present complications to you early on in your first few months once you have this awakening, this remembrance. All people who are spiritual were born spiritual. It doesn't matter what they've gone through in their life, it's reawakening to something. The point with that being, if you're in the world today, you're here for a reason. And it's not to make it. It's not necessary to fall in love, though you will. It's not necessary to improve anything around you, except your meditative times, your quiet times, where you can see Him, the only God. And you, His only friend. For when He speaks to us, it's as though we're the only person in the world. We all know what was just said. For to God, we are the only person in the world. It's a very personal friendship, and it's utterly mystical. And you're purified in a divine fire, we could say, but not because there's anything wrong with you. And this is necessary to comprehend early on. If you want to think, well, I was a sinner or whatever, all that's correct. But the point is to get beyond all of that so you can do some good. In other words, not just be humble and contrite, but be humble and contrite to a degree that the Almighty Himself will be able to live right through us. And then we'll heal the whole world. That's the mission. So wherever you go, you'll see evidence that life never ends. We feel the sacredness of our forefathers. But there is a condition called illumination, enlightenment, nirvana, God consciousness, Christ consciousness. It's a oneness with the Almighty. And it's not that difficult. It's just simply to understand that the world is a temptation. And if you don't take part in it, if you're not tempted, there's no secrets in your mind, I'm going to do this, I have to go out Friday, I love her, I want this, I want that. Let it all go and you'll take one final breath in the morning air and you'll disappear. That's the truth. And disappear into the living light. You become the light living. There are so many words for it. The poetry of love conveys the thought, the fact, the desire, the need, the requirement for fullness of love. To love so completely that you disappear. But it's not a lust for love, it's a comprehension of the beauty and purity. Aside from the passion or the need of love, its elemental structure is just an openness where you step through the mortal sphere and you become one of the immortals. And again, you must understand, because it helps psychologically and emotionally, that you began as an immortal and you're here to save, to illumine, salvation, to illumine those who would be illumined. And if there are those that wouldn't be, if the world is an illusion, that's okay. That's not our job. That's okay. We just don't engage them because all they want is to engage and then they win. It's called temptation. So if you're simple and quiet and human and kind enough, you won't be tempted. There's no need to be. Desirelessness isn't some ultra-religious place. It's a kindness. It's a decency. It's a realization that if you're going to help anyone in the world, you're going to help them out of the world, out from the world. You'll go to heaven upon the elbow of someone you've helped, spiritually. And if you look in your heart right now, in your soul, it's like Thoreau said that most men live a life of quiet desperation. You're always trying to prove yourself, to get ahead, to make it happen, to be a better person. You're always upset with this one or that one in your environment. And if you let that go, and it is as easy as is being said. It will take 3 months, 5 months, a year, one moment of realization. And when you have that moment of realization, and in that realize you're here for a purpose, there's nothing wrong with you, and you gave up your part of the divine ocean of beingness to be here. You're a spiritual hero. Once you realize that, then it doesn't bespeak the fact that you're better than other people and I'm pure. It's you realize your nothingness, and it's a sweet state to not be anyone. Does that make sense? It's relaxing. You can let go of all the shields. You don't have to prove yourself anymore. You're a highly intelligent person, and you've learned how to communicate with all the different types of people, and you'll use that as a healing instrument for those who, forgive me for this, that you find worthy. And they may not be many, and they may be many. The point is you will become a healing instrument to heal the hearts and souls in a spiritual sense, because the only way through the pain and trauma of believing you're immortal in a world for a time is to transmit this sense, this healing sense, the healing balm of understanding that we are forever. No one ever died. You cannot, you will not die. This sense of you, when you let go of the mortal entrapments around us, will be the same sense that God has of himself. It's so sacred, so holy, and yet so human and contrite and decent and true. And when you're here, you can peer off into eternity, always. And it's very interesting. And all those you love and find to be humble, decent people in your life will be there with you. Not in a human sense, it's just a purity and a beauty, and it's very human. It can change moment to moment, day in and day out. In the same way you experience an old love with it. You miss the person, you're sorry it didn't work, and it's not a lusting for that love, it's a reverence. It's a reverence for life. Life meaning this godness. Study the writings of all the great spiritual beings that have ever lived, and you'll find at the core of their being is this adoration for the divine. And when you're there, you'll see an adoration of God, of the divine, for us. And every moment of your life, from the time you were born to now, God has been 1,000,000,000% with us. And I say that because when you begin to wake up, you'll realize that every moment that this has happened, although the dark force is at you to entrap you, you realize that God was with you, and certain experiences and relationships and circumstances occurred in a way that God aimed in a certain way to fulfill your spiritual need to self-realize and then to heal the nations. And it's going to be unimaginably more simple, more sweet, more wondrous than we would dream. There is a God. You are God's radiance. You're not other. You're not different than that. And this divine realization and the infinity of God's intelligence is yours. God just gives God away. And there are infinite realms, golden oceans of ecstasy, of understanding. You can't bring them into human words because the word infinite has to be used. And you're one with it. And it changes every moment. And the next moment, it's more infinite. God actually is God. And none of the stupidity of this world has anything to do with God. It's like waking up from a bad dream. Oh, it was just a bad dream. And that's what this world is. If you study the writings of all the spiritual persons who have ever lived, you'll find that sense throughout. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not your problems or the solution to your problems. You're made of something kind and true and real. You are forever. The main point of all this is to understand God actually is God, and every moment of our existence from here on in, God will be with you, you'll be conscious of it, so there are no details. There's never been a detail that impressive in this world to get God's attention. God cannot see the world because it's infinitely stupid. I think I called it Satan's Casino in a couple of these classes because they'll get you, the dark force will get you, well, I'll wait till Saturday, I'll wait for this. There's nothing to wait for. Drop the shields now. That's what self-realization is all about. And you'll walk through the fire and the passions quietly, sweetly, serenely. And we'll all do our part. And what was, in other words, the abominations of this world will no longer need be. We'll walk out arm in arm in our spiritual consciousness. That's the war. To not be tempted. Meditation is a sacred rite. You're in adoration of the divine. And the rest, it's over. It's that simple. There is a God. You are God's presence. Forgetting about ego or fighting yourself or temptation or sin, it's all. Step right through. Of all considerations in existence, our relationship to the divine has to be direct. Our adoration of the divine has to be in terms that are eternal. Because God is eternal. We are an eternal, our soul is an emanation of God. You can't go to anyone to understand this, to know it. You can see a priest, a healer, or this, a friend, a grandmom. There's every one of us has someone in our life that's kind of clairvoyant and kind of special, and we can see them from time to time. That's a part of the puzzle. I mean, we're here and we want to help each other, but it's the experience itself is seems to be very rare, but it's not. I know many people that have it, and they do not discuss it with anyone because in this world, no one ever listens to anyone. I have certain friends that have this experience, and when we see each other, there's nothing to say. And yet, if I were alone and I felt lonely at some point, I'd be like, oh, I'd like to see someone, but I'd see them, there's nothing to say. Because they have the same identical condition, and you're looking right through the world like it never was. Because the world never was. Only you, only your soul, only your heart, your kindness. It's a wonderful, wonderful moment when we fall back into the hands of the living God. Thank you. I know throughout, right now thinking of Nepal, they have all these stupas, all these places that represent the Buddha's enlightenment. It's not a religion, it's a philosophy, that if you understand it, then you step right through to God consciousness. I know I've had friends here when I came back from India a long time ago, and they were Christian or this or that, and it was like, it didn't matter, or they don't believe in God. You know, all the lamas or yogis I met, they talk very naturally about God, and it's just people, it's like newspapers giving the news about the socio-political atmosphere. Well, that's not what's really there if you look behind the scenes of anything. If you look behind the scenes of the spiritual people throughout the world, their relationship is with God. And all the books and the writings are one thing. And the experience is with God. Who is God? So in Nepal, they would have these little areas where you just step near to it or into it, or there might be sometimes some monks, Tibetan monks, chanting in a little, called a chapel, a little temple there. And they're all over the countryside, and it's as though the world doesn't exist. So I'm saying with people who truly, truly are part of God, it's something very mystical, something very beautiful, very permanent. And people, I would see people walking up and back by them all the time, and I would never go in because because it was something holy, and I knew it, and I'd feel it, and thank you. And you never feel worthy to approach such a sacred atmosphere. And in truth, God feels that way about us, and I know this cannot be understood. We're God's sensory equipment in this world because God cannot see the world. Again, according to all the mystical traditions, the world does not exist. It's an illusion. But it is a hell, and it is a torment and a spiritual crime against all the people that are here. Again, that bad dream, but it is a Satan's casino. And if we stop being attracted to it, wanting or needing from it, then we can have a certain healing presence that can calm the seas. These are not just words. There is a God. We are his emanation. If we seek him above all else, and it just involves a contrite heart, a simple prayer, a kind thought. There's nothing complicated about it. The scripture is, seek not the things that the Gentiles seek. Or it's all, you know, it's written about, it's studied. There is a holy person, a healer in every tribe, in every country, and and you see that just indicators everywhere. But in your own heart, once we're quiet, once we know God is God and God will be with us, and that's the message of today's empowerment meditation, is that there is a God, there is this thing, this magical shield, golden, brilliant shield that's lit from within and out and through, and it's called faith. And when you have faith, there are no questions. And you live out the day-to-day somehow, and you don't have to think about it, you don't have to make notes, you don't have to order it, it will be done. God will be with you through this forever. And God is God. And God is endlessly more aware of every moment of our existence, of every breath, than we could ever dream. Some of these thoughts seem to contradict one another, but the experience is sweet, and it's kind, and it's human, and it's real, and it's humble, and it's affectionate, and it's decent, and it's brilliant. And more than anything, it's you. Isn't it you? There are no complications in spiritual realization. It's all understanding. And the wisdom just moves through you like an early morning wind. Just nice. It's always nice to be near Him, our Father and our God. You will not die. God will be with you through this period of illumination, and you won't die and go to heaven. Heaven will be where you are. And that's how we'll end the whole thing. The Battle of Armageddon is stop believing in Satan, the devil, the world, the illusion, and just walk kindly, happily, freely, sweetly, lovingly with our Father and our friend. It's very, very simple to know Him. And when you know Him, even breathing, even thinking, even existence is a temptation. And that's lighter than air to know these things. And again, you'll never walk, you'll walk an inch above the ground. You'll never feel like you're here again. And it's a very sacred state, and yet it's very human. It's very natural to be holy. You're just not taking part in all the glitz and glamour of the world. And there's no glitz and glamour of it. We all know what was just said, what those words meant. There's no thrill like kindness. There's no power like God's truth. There's no sweetness and dignity. Like knowing Him, the only God. You are His friend. There's nothing to fear. God will be with you every moment, every second, every day, forever. And we'll walk out of this hand in hand, arm in arm, freely, happily, contritely, and powerfully. There's nothing to fear. There are great men who've lived lives of tremendous embattlement with the dark forces, and we can appreciate their existence, and our life is not going to be that difficult. It's just understanding the words that were just said, the simplicity in our psyche, in our consciousness. It just involves spending a little more in the quiet. And if there's no quiet, you can do it in a war zone. I know this. You can do it under any pressure. I know this. You can do it anywhere. I know this. God will be with you. I know this. It's a time of destiny. Time to put away childish things. There's nothing to want or need when you know Him, the only God. We talked about not dying, sacred sites, the presence of your grandma. I never met my granddad, and I didn't know anything much about him. And he appeared to me maybe 2 months back, and he was a very, very holy man. He said, "I am your grandfather," and just appeared like that and disappeared. So I knew my grandmom. She was quite spiritual, and And for most of us, our grandmom, she represents a kind of love that it's just a pure love. She's not involved in the day-to-day. And when my grandmom passed, and sure enough, I fell asleep on the couch, and she came down the stairs in my little house in South Philly, and in a gorgeous silver gown, just representing the fact she was there. And you know, it was one of the two things in my life I think I felt guilt about, is I wanted to spend more time with her before she passed. And I was just a child, but you understand. And but the people like that make everything in our life okay. I go with my buddy Greg, whose dad survived the death march in Burma, and when we go to the grave site together, he has his mom, his little sister, everything, and all the relatives, and for me being a war vet or whatever, and you just feel these hundreds and hundreds of presences of those who've given their life for their country, and it's a hallowed place. There's no pain, there's no like a bad movie with the disembodied or whatever. It's just spiritual. It's a place of reverence and truth, and you don't do anything wrong when you're around that. Imagine being more directly, not taking anything from that, involved in the actual depths and presence of heaven itself, of God's heaven, of the throne of grace. And you'll find such a place in your adoration of God, in your meditation, in your prayer times. It will simply come to you, and it will build and build and build. You'll have an intelligence that you've never read about. Like I say, God from this moment forever will be with us, will transcend the mediocrity of this world, the ordinariness of it, and we'll be free and whole and happy. And of course, we'll be impinged upon by the dark force, and we'll be very happy to be under attack by the dark force, because you'll see that everything that was just said is true, that it has nothing behind it. And if you don't give it anything, if you don't engage it, what do you got today, Satan? It's nothing. And you don't even say that. I don't think that, because I give it nothing, because it is nothing. Again, it's a dream state. It's a bad dream. But you came into this dream voluntarily as a spiritual instrument, because you sensed something in the universe as a divine presence was needed, and you dropped in here. So those of us who are spiritual, like Greg's dad and so on, they lived a life of tremendous trauma and pain and did all the good they could. And today it's time to say that let's roll the whole thing up. Why not? And when you know God spiritually and you're involved with God, then what's being said is not so big. If you think the world is big, then you're not spiritual, or you need to work on that. Let go of the world quietly. It's like when you find the one you love, there's nothing else. Imagine finding that the one you love is God, and God is in the hearts of those you love. And when you're very quiet and calm and sedate, you'll see that. And you'll see God speaking to you through the hearts and souls of those you love. And you'll inspire them to calm down, to walk away from it all. There's nothing to need or want or desire or have or hold. Again, God's presence will be with us. This thing called faith will answer all questions. And the little archetypes of normal living, the agencies, the banks, they'll be going in different ways, and you'll realize that everything will resolve. And when you step into this and you have your early realizations of it, remembrances of it, you'll see that you've been guided that way throughout your whole life. And all of us who are spiritual know this. And everything will be answered. The saint one time said that divine love has always answered every spiritual as well as human need. But the understanding of it is thinner than that, lighter than that, airier than that, kinder than that, truer than that, more permanent than that. They're just an isness of life. And it's so wonderful to know Him, that he knows you, and to live this, and to be you, no matter who cares, no matter who approves or does not approve. It's a state of wonder, spiritual realization. It's just understanding these words and the sentiment behind it, that there really is a God. And God really is God in the sense of utter kindness, decency. But it involves a spiritual realm. And all your sensory equipment will become quiet. It's quite wonderful. Sometimes no one will understand it in your life, and you'll disappear back into the woodwork, and that's okay. Like we said last week about you could be in an apartment or something for 9 years, and you leave and you weren't happy one moment there. Nothing good happened. You had no friends. Everything was wrong. You had no money. Making the rent was hard, and you left, and you miss it so much because, and this shows you who you are as a spiritual being, because you gave so much of your heart. You scattered about so many places because you wanted life to be. And that's what's being said today. Look at yourself this moment. You desire love, kindness, truth, healing, hope, joy, despite the fact that every single one of us has been under assault of the dark force every moment of our life, right? You got to prove yourself everywhere you are, around everyone, no matter who you are. No one ever actually really listens. We might have one or two people that we love or care for, like my friend Gabby here walked in my life. There's a holy woman, you know. It's just very gentle, sweet, kind. It's and you can breathe. You find someone like that. Find someone like that. Not for yourself, but to let them know that they're doing their work. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for listening.